this next oral argument. And so I am going to turn it over to Judge Perlman.
Good morning, everyone. At this point, we will go on the record. So it is still May 5th, 2016. We are here in Los Angeles. It is 11:50 a.m. And this matter is the petition for termination or modification of probation regarding Nathan Brian Kimmerly. Am I pronouncing that correctly? Kimmerly. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kimmerly. MD. And it's case number 2012090-468. As was stated, I'm Lori Perlman. I'm an administrative law judge with the Office of Administrative Hearings, and I've been assigned to sit with the medical board, which is convened here today to consider the petition. At this time, I will just note some time constraints. We will first have opening argument by respondent, which will last up to 15 minutes. We'll then have responsive argument by complainant, Deputy Attorney General, which will last for 15 minutes. Once again, we'll have closing argument by respondent, which can last up to 5 minutes. And finally, closing argument by complainant, lasting up to 5 minutes. At this time, I'll take appearances from the participants. I'll take counsel first, and then I'll have you state and spell your name for the record, please.
Good morning, Deputy Attorney General Carolyn Westphal. That's K-A-R-O-L-Y-N. Westphal, W-E-S-T-F-A-L.
Thank you, Ms. Westphal. And we have here,
Dr. Nathan Kimmerly, doctor is K-U-E, Evans and Martin, E-R-L-E.
thank you, Dr. Kimmerly. Okay, so you can begin when you're ready.
So basically, I spent a lot of time formulating the written declaration, and I wanted to represent myself to show that in fact I do have a lot of remorsefulness about what has happened, and that the length of time and the amount of testing has been quite extensive. Basically, I want to first start with just looking at the facts, right? Let's look at the concrete facts presented so that when I talk about the story of how I rehabilitated, then we understand exactly how much evidence there really is.
And I just will remind everyone that we are to state the facts in the record rather than go beyond what is in the administrative record.
So if we look at Exhibit 1, we have on page 49 one board certified physician who attests to the fact that he feels, after knowing me, I still am working with him today. I've been working with Crown View Medical for a year and a half now. At that point in February 17th in 2015, he feels that I have geared myself towards a successful future again, and that he had no concerns about returning to drug addiction of harmful illegal drugs. That was regard to Dr. Mark Melvin, a very respected board certified person that owns 2 establishments in San Diego, in Coronado and in Carlsbad, San Diego. The second letter is from Ann Cox on page 51 of Exhibit 1, and it also attests to the fact that she feels, as she's gotten to know me every 3 months, that my rehabilitative efforts have been convincing. These are both very busy people. They work every day. It's very hard for them to make appearances, but I attest to the fact that we all are in good standing together to this day. It's been a year and a half, since October 2014. Also, I want to point out the fact on page 56 of Exhibit 1, the certification and congratulations from Congresswoman Grace Napolitano. That was back in January 11th of 2011 of an extensive rehabilitative effort with the LA Cotta Allen House, where I spent that 6.5 months rehabilitating. They tested me extensively 6 times a month, and throughout that entire occurrence of that rehabilitative effort, there was no positive findings whatsoever. And then I was one of the 5 to 8% that was lucky enough to be able to graduate because they felt that my rehabilitation was convincing, and that was signed by Grace Napolitano. The next, because I wanted to continue my sincerity in rehabilitative efforts, it includes the Riverside Recovery Resources of Lake Elsinore. I spent some time just kind of getting away, kind of relaxing and taking some time to recover from all of this. And they tested me 5 times a month, and again, as certified by this recovery center, contracted by federal services, they attested the fact that there were no positive drugs. And I spent those months in group therapy, continuing the group therapy that I had gotten rehabilitation at Ellicott Allen House, and there were no positive tests. And then there's more certifications, or certificates from that. And then towards the end of it, they don't have really a page to it, but Rachel Snarson, the U.S. probation officer, attested to the fact that from June 2011 to December 2013 that there were no positive tests, and that is from a federal probation officer. So there is a very extensive timeline of me testing negative for drugs all throughout those years, and it attests to the fact by reputable people that run these programs, and including federal services, that it would be, absolutely silly to think that a probation officer would lie and say that there were positive tests. Like, they have stated that there are negative tests all throughout 2011 to 2013. On top of that, I also submitted the Exhibit 8 of Dr. Meldon's extensive curriculum vitae, which shows his extensive knowledge of adult psychiatry. He's one of the most respected board-certified physicians in San Diego. He's done extensive amounts of trainings and certificates. He's done extensive trials, and we have worked together all the time throughout the week for 1.5 years now at this point. And I think that he has very good credentials as a physician, and he's taught me and he's stewarded me back into these really good rehabilitative efforts, I think quite profoundly, actually. If we go to Exhibit 4, on page 29, it also attests to the fact that while I was having my reviews, that Sandra, the investigator, talked to her supervisor, Irene Bisson, who reviewed my order, and it did not say that I had to abstain from the use of alcohol. They informed me that I was able to use Listerine or drink alcohol as was previously requested. This was not something that I just surprised them with and we just decided to do. This was over an extensive amount of time that I felt like if I wanted to use Listerine or have a glass of wine on occasion, that would be okay. And they agreed with that, and we proceeded forward with that. Since July of 2 years ago, I don't think I have been used that right whatsoever. There has been a few positive tests along the way, because sometimes I test anywhere from 3 to 6 times a month. But there are many months where I test negative, and usually if I test positive, it's about once a month for alcohol. Recently, there were several months that went by with all negative tests for alcohol, me not craving alcohol, me not seeking alcohol, all that was verified by the DSM-5 and these kind of criteria of dependency, addiction, tolerance, and whatnot. And this is because I've spent extensive amounts of time readjusting deep cognitive constructs about how I look about my life and how I want to mature as a human being. I feel like I've grown up and I've restabilized, and I am avidly aware of my situation in this whole matter, that in no way do I have any cravings or desires to return to crystal meth, or what we know commonly as methamphetamine. The reason why sometimes it's hard to talk about it is it's obviously humiliating. But at the same time, it would be very implausible to me to think that after all of this clear and convincing evidence, all the way since April 2010, where there's not been one positive finding of illegal drugs, that one would think that I would be secretly consuming illegal drugs. And it would be kind of implausible to me to think that it's clear and convincing that I wasn't committed to this if I had spent all this time in rehabilitative services, post-rehabilitative services, federal services, and now 3 years of California Medical Board drug testing services that have all been negative for illegal drugs, that I wouldn't have some kind of remorse or sanctity towards the situation. I feel like I've changed as a person. In all ways, I feel responsible for what happened, and I'm very sad about what had transpired. I feel like my feelings were not able to be communicated in front of the Judge Roy Hewitt, and I really feel sad about that situation, because I have spent extensive amounts of time rehabilitating myself, and I do feel really remorseful when we become sober about something of that situation. You look back on all that happened, and it's hard to believe that you acted that way under the influence of drugs, right? I think that it's irresponsible on some level to try to pretend that I wasn't under some deep psychosis at that time. It would be unreasonable. I mean, it's clearly known, on media that I thought I was Frodo. I thought people in LA were worse. I was clearly delusional. I was clearly psychotic at that time. And I don't think that I think it's irresponsible to try to make it seem like I wasn't impaired. But at the same time, in no way do I think that that justifies my poor behavior. I feel absolutely responsible and remorseful for what happened, and it's hard to talk about sometimes, but I have spent and I have done the work in that rehabilitative effort. Also, if you look at page 128 of Exhibit 4, it talks about how Dr. Cox feels that I've spent extensive amounts of time in my documentation efforts. Since October 2014, I have seen probably over 1,000 patients, and she feels that those documentations have been very, very good. I've spent hours and hours every day making sure that those documentations are very extensive, and if anything, they feel that I overdo it, to be perfectly honest. Why do I overdo it? Because I know how important this work is. And why do I make sure that everything is documented up and down and left and right on that piece of paper? Because I know how important that game can change, in the sense that people's lives are at stake, and this is a very serious matter.
Could you spell Dr. Cox's name for the record?
It's C-O-X.
Okay, and going forward, if you use any names, if you'll go ahead and spell them.
So basically, to summarize, the point that I want to make is that when we talk in front of the judge, that one of the basic premises of the judgment, and this is why I'm here for the reconsideration, is that that the penalty for urine random biologic drug screening was reduced. And in fact, if you look at the first lab data, which is available to all people, that actually in 2014 I was tested 45 times. And I'm sorry, in 2014 I was tested 45 times, and in 2015 I was tested approximately 47 times. And if you just do the simple math of 12 times 4, 4 times a month on average would be 48 tests. So in fact, that is not a reduction, and that has been traveling through the paperwork in this reconsideration that isn't actually a reduction. I don't think that 48 is a lesser number than 45 to 47 tests per year. So I also want to bring out the point that from March 2013 to October 19th, which was when we presented in front of the judge, that it was 925 times that I checked incorrectly. And that there was 13 times that, by whatever circumstance, that I had failed to do so. Again, I am very remorseful for those 13 failed check-ins, but I want to reaffirm the fact that any of those times that I checked that I realized instantly, because my head feels that guilty about that kind of stuff, that I did test immediately the next day. And I communicated that every time to Sandra, who was the inspector on the case. So if you look at the actual data, it was 98 to 99% of the time I did check in appropriately, and that has been occurring. And if you look at the data that the last time I failed to check in was May of 2015, otherwise there has not been one failed check-in in all of 2015 and to date. So the last failed check-in was basically May 2015, which I basically was at a gym in La Jolla, 24 Fitness. I clicked the button on my phone, I thought that I had checked in, and it had actually not. I thought that I had checked in a second time, and I thought that I had not. These are the type of things that happen when you do these kind of random biologic fluids, that sometimes you think you checked in, and you didn't. Luckily, on that date in May 2015, there was no drug testing that day. But I have been very earnest since then. I also just want to reaffirm the fact that back in 2011, in January, that they did not just consider my situation lightly about the rehabilitative effort. That they really only let about 8% of those people, the people that we were in that situation graduate, because the extensive committee looked at that data and looked at my efforts and looked at my written statements throughout the full recovery process, that they felt that they were sincere. I did also spend some time in Palm Springs working with people, and to this day, I know for sure that many of them in that Palm Springs effort are sober today. So it saddens me in many ways to be thought of as that there is no sincerity whatsoever in my recovery process, since I spent so much time getting people sober. I think that in many ways, there were some severe circumstances, and to be honest, at this point, what I'm really trying to communicate is that because it's been 6 years, is that in many ways, I want to just move on. I want to be with, it's like in July of 2015, we finally got rights for gay marriage, and I would like to just have a normal life, find a husband, and move on from this kind of lifestyle, because I'm now a man of 43, and I feel terrible for what I did as a young person.
Dr. Kimberly, you're within the 15 minutes, so if you'll wrap up.
Okay, for sure. I've also done extensive continuance with the PACE. I've gotten a pass with the PACE program. I've also worked with Mary Lee Rosas. She feels that there's no further need to continue in therapy with her, and the investigator has stated that I can write a statement about that to move on from that. And I just want to reaffirm the point that there has not been a reduction whatsoever. I am asking, because they did not include the DSM-5 criteria from the discussion with Roy Hewitt, that I have not shown in any way in DSM-5 to have an alcohol use disorder at this point in my life.
Thank you, Dr. Kimberly. Okay, Ms. Westphal?
We're here today on a petition for early termination or modification of probation. And while the board has asked for oral argument from both sides, I want one point to be clear, is that the burden in this case rests squarely on Dr. Kimberly. It is his burden to convince you, his licensing board, by clear and convincing evidence that he has sufficiently rehabilitated himself to overcome the board's prior adverse judgment. And we're looking to determine whether or not a person is rehabilitated such that their license should be fully restored. The California Code of Regulations provides that the board should consider certain things. Among those things are the nature and severity of the underlying acts, the time elapsed since the acts, and any evidence presented of rehabilitation. So let's start with the nature and severity of the underlying acts. What exactly did he do to wind up on probation to begin with? Dr. Kimberly was licensed by the board in November of 2004. And very shortly after that, he opened up a private practice in Hollywood. With no oversight whatsoever, he basically presented himself as nothing more than a common drug dealer. Dr. Kimberly used his medical license to sell controlled substances to the public. I say sell because he was caught repeatedly providing for no medical need or reason whatsoever, without taking any prior medical history, sometimes writing them in the name of persons who were not even present, sometimes post-dating them, and oftentimes instructing the person to fill the scripts somewhere far away to avoid detection. These prescriptions were all for controlled substances, ranging from Adderall to Xanax to Norco. And this did not just happen once or twice. He was caught selling scripts to undercover agents on August 8th of 2009, on September 9th of 2009, on October 12th of 2009, on October 16th of 2009, on December 16th of 2009, on February 12th of 2010, on February 24th of 2010, and again on March 19th of 2010. These facts are not in dispute. And of course, there is zero chance that those were the only times that he sold prescriptions. We know this because of the sheer number of prescriptions he wrote in 2009. That year, Dr. Kimmerly wrote 2,382 scripts for 30 milligram dose, the highest at the time, of amphetamine salts alone. This does not consider any other prescriptions he wrote that year. 2,382 different prescriptions for Adderall. Breaking that down further, that means in 1 year, he wrote approximately 6 prescriptions for Adderall each day, every day, for 365 days. That year, Dr. Kimmerly wrote more of those prescriptions than any other physician in the state of California. All while he had only been licensed for 5 years, while working in Hollywood in solo practice with no oversight. But there's more. During that same period, he was actively practicing medicine, treating patients while addicted to and under the influence of crystal methamphetamine. Dr. Kimmerly's repeated use of his medical license in this regard was a huge risk to public safety. His egregious, chronic, and unprofessional behavior was dangerous, unethical, criminal, and shameful to the profession as a whole. In this day and age, where celebrities and common people alike are dying in staggering numbers from prescription drug overdoses, Dr. Kimmerly is just lucky that none of his so-called patients died, at least that we know of. But despite these facts, Dr. Kimmerly is here and asking this board to turn the page, claiming he has done enough, he is rehabilitated, and enough time has passed. It has, after all, been 6 years since he was caught and charged with federal felonies, spent 2.5 months in jail, undergone extensive rehabilitation treatment as ordered by his criminal probation, and 3 years since his board placed him on probation. It has been some time, that is true. But the passage of time is but one factor the board should consider. The board must also look at his evidence presented of rehabilitation. Evidence of rehabilitation is more than calling your parents in to testify that you're a good guy. It's more than presenting 2 letters of recommendation from physicians, the authors of which did not testify in his hearing, and who were willing to write those recommendations after only knowing him for a few months. Evidence of rehabilitation is more than completion of an inpatient or outpatient treatment program ordered by your criminal probation, or jumping through the hoops required by your licensing board. Rehabilitation is a state of mind. Dr. Kimmerly appears to have jumped through the hoops of probation thus far, as he's pointed out to the board. With the exception, of course, of those 13 separate dates between May of 2013 and October of 2015, where he either checked in late or failed to check in altogether for his biological fluid testing. Of course, any one of those could have been deemed a violation of his probation. With that caveat, he appears to have remained clean and sober from illegal drugs and controlled substances while he's been on probation with the board. But another one of those hoops he had to jump through for the board was to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. That was conducted by Dr. Scheffner in 2009. Schaffner testified at the underlying hearing in this case about his evaluation. And that evaluation notably occurred well after Dr. Kimmerly had successfully completed that world-renowned 6.5-month treatment for his criminal court. Dr. Schaffner testified that he found Dr. Kimmerly to be evasive, to minimize his criminal conduct, and that he essentially blamed his misdeeds on his own addiction, which he claimed and continues to claim made him, quote, psychotic. Dr. Schaffner, a board-certified forensic psychiatrist appointed by the board, concluded that methamphetamine did not cause Dr. Kimmerly to engage in this conduct, as it involved chronic, goal-directed behavior that required intact cognitive abilities and intent. During that evaluation, Dr. Kimmerly told Dr. Schaffner that alcohol lowered his inhibition to take other drugs. And yet, despite all of his documented substance abuse treatment and undocumented self-help meetings and other rehabilitative efforts he asserts he's undergone, Dr. Kimmerly continues to drink alcohol. An addict, still consuming an addictive, mind-altering substance. A huge red flag, according to Dr. Schaffner, who further stated that a person with a history of such severe substance abuse that sobriety is a fundamental piece of rehabilitation that is lacking. Minds may differ as to why Dr. Kimmerly did what he did. Dr. Schaffner doesn't believe that it's because of the methamphetamine. It wasn't the methamphetamine that caused him to engage in very deliberate and calculating unprofessional conduct. However, it's clear that Dr. Kimmerly essentially blames his misdeeds on his addiction to methamphetamine, which is why the bulk of the evidence he's presented to the board, both strong and weak, seem to center around his abstinence from drugs. But Dr. Kimmerly was not placed on probation because he's a drug addict. He was placed on probation for unprofessional conduct amounting to corrupt and dishonest acts, which he may or may not have engaged in because of his addiction. So other than sobriety, what has he shown? As indicated in the papers that I've submitted to the board, Dr. Kimmerly has shown minimization of his misconduct throughout these proceedings. Now, according to the 12-step program philosophy, which Dr. Kimmerly testified at the hearing he spent thousands of hours attending, one of the steps to recovery is to admit the exact nature of your wrongs. Similarly, in the law, the court has found that fully acknowledging the wrongfulness of past actions is an essential step towards rehabilitation. And yet, Dr. Kimmerly's written declaration to the board dated March 11th of this year is the most accepting of responsibility he has shown since these proceedings began. Hopefully, finally, after 3 years of probation with this board, he's beginning to take the most important step in rehabilitation, and that's to change, the change in mind that's required. But he's clearly not there yet. You know, the purpose of my argument is not to demonize Dr. Kimmerly. It is not, though he might feel that way at times. The purpose is not to humiliate him or to minimize what efforts he has taken to maintain his sobriety from drugs. My focus here is on my concern for public safety, which I believe is at risk if probation is terminated or minimized. The protection of the public will always be the highest priority of this board. Probation was imposed for 7 years for a reason, with very specific terms and conditions that were appropriate for the underlying conduct here. We oppose this petition based upon the egregious and criminal conduct, which was extremely dangerous to the patients he served and exhibited exceptionally poor judgment. We do not believe enough time has passed or sufficient evidence of rehabilitation has been shown, considering the gravity of the underlying error, which led to Dr. Kimmerly's discipline just 3 years ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Westphal. Dr. Kimmerly, you have up to 5 minutes.
I think in many ways we've established that the DSM-5 is the gold standard that we use today the PACE program is the gold standard for the way that we test the doctor, and I've established myself through UCSD PACE, and I have passed sufficiently. I did go over all the academic, the documentation course part of it, the mock interviews. It was extremely extensive and rigorous. It was not something that was a small effort. I did establish my knowledge base, was very well done with their reports. There was also no lawsuits whatsoever from any patients. There was no patients that actually claimed any harm from the prescriptions. In no way am I trying to minimize my egregious behavior, and I want to be very clear about that. The only point that I want to make is that after all the numerous amounts of months spent at the very end of the sentencing, where I actually didn't serve any prison time, there was 2.5 months of pre-trial to discover what kind of person I actually was. But there was no actual subsequent post-trial jail time whatsoever. And at the end of that actual sentencing, there was this moment with the judge, with Dolly G, and the prosecution and the defense, and there was this question, is Adderall less dangerous than crystal meth? And nobody could even answer that question because of the way that the Scheduling II system is. And I just thought that was very interesting, right? That we couldn't establish the difference if there was any less harm between crystal meth and Adderall in a town that does extensive and horrific amounts of crystal meth in Hollywood. And we know that from the extensive 2013 reports that has done a meta-analysis across multiple nations that the cardiovascular risk of Adderall is significantly decreased over methamphetamine. Do I feel like that was justifying anything? No. I feel terrible, but under the influence of methamphetamine throughout 2018 at different times, all the way up to April 2010, I obviously was under the influence of it. I obviously was paranoid. I obviously was disorganized. And in that sense, it kind of pains me to think that they obviously saw me as being this way, but they did nothing over that August to April period of just saying, hey, like, let's shut this down. We obviously have a drug problem. But no, they just let that go for months and months. I'm not trying to justify my behavior. I was addicted to drugs, and I feel terrible about it. I just think that there's a lot of misleading statements. I take a little bit of hurt about the fact that she keeps saying that I just try to jump through hoops. That's always what she says. I don't look at my recovery process as jumping through hoops. And that's what Carolyn Westphal always likes to characterize it, which I think is insulting. I spent years and years in rehabilitative efforts, and I have shown over the last several years that in no way have I increased or been gluttonous with alcohol consumption whatsoever. To be honest, I feel as strong as ever. The only times I consume alcohol would be at a pharmaceutical dinner where there's no cocaine, there's no illegal drugs, there's no chance of something happening in that regard, and that's why a few tests are positive. But other than that, I feel very, very bad about what happened, and in no way do I feel like I'm trying to minimize what I did, and I'm very sorry for my behavior, despite however she wants to characterize me. Whether it was about harm reduction or whatever issue in Hollywood, it's not even, to me, it's a moot point at this point. I just feel like what I did was wrong. And I thank you for this wonderful moment to speak to you all for this opportunity today. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Carolyn. Ms. Westphal, final.
Oversight and monitoring, particularly biological fluid testing, was and continues to be necessary for a physician who has erred to this degree and who has suffered from substance abuse to the extent that it impacted his medical practice and patient care, and who, since being placed on probation, has failed to maintain complete sobriety. Although Dr. Kimberly has shown some evidence of rehabilitation, there is no truer indication of rehabilitation than sustained conduct over an extended period of time. The board did not revoke Dr. Kimberly's license 3 years ago, despite the gravity of his errors. The board gave him a as well as to aid in his continued rehabilitation. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Westphal. Does the panel members have any questions? I see one question. Would you state your name for the record?
Dr. Ron Lewis. Dr. Kimberly, what is your medical educational background? I can't find it in the record.
I attended UC Irvine Medical School and did training at UCLA Valley VA Systems residency.
In what residency?
The San Fernando Valley Psychiatry Training Program at UCLA.
You board certified?
I am not.
Not board certified. How many years did you complete in psychiatry residency?
2.5 years.
Okay. The other question, in your practice in West Hollywood, I believe, what kind of practice was that?
It was a private practice, solo practice.
In what type of specialty?
Psychiatry.
In psychiatry. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes, I see a question. Would you state your name, please?
Dr. Randy Hawkins. Dr. Kimberly, are you in psychotherapy now?
I am currently with Dr. Resses in psychotherapy. She feels at this point that there's no need to continue at this point, and we are working out that detail at this moment.
Would you spell the name of the doctor you just mentioned?
Mary Lou Resses, who I've been with for several years.
And can you spell her name for the record?
Sure, it's Marilou space Rosas.
Thank you. One other question, yes?
Are you currently involved in any sort of 12-step program for addiction?
So we talked about this last time, and I am very eager to do anything that you all consider to be an important way of continuing a group process. If there's any physician groups, I think that those are superior, to be perfectly honest, because unfortunately the success rate of NA is about 5% or less. It's not that I want to hold myself different or not do a process of therapeutic regard. It's just that I feel like there's probably a better way to do that. I have not in any way had cravings for methamphetamine, and I have not used any amphetamines or any illegal substances in the last 6 years.
Outside of the program and your family, have you had or do you currently have any sort of a sponsor that you can contact?
I do have a sponsor in the NA systems, but it does change over time because people do relapse and I stay sober. We're talking about places like in San Diego that you will see people relapse. I've been to NA meetings where there were needles in the sink. There's people seizing out at an NA meeting, and it's just very, very inappropriate and shameful in many ways. And these are things that nobody wants to talk about, that the success rate of NA is less than 5%. So I feel like there's got to be a better way than spending time in a forum like that. And for example, I would be very open to any kind of continuing group process for physicians or people of medical backgrounds, because I think there's something important about us sharing that experience together.
Thank you.
And the gentleman that just asked the question, could you state
Dr.
your...
Bishop, B-I-S-H-O-P, Michael Bishop.
Thank you, Dr. Bishop. Any other questions? Nope, I see no further questions, so we will have the matter taken under submission, and we thank you for your appearance today. We're off to work.
Now we go into closed session.